The areas I want to talk briefly about, then I'm going to open for questions and answers. And I really always appreciate coming here because before I even get to the podium, many of you have already brought me your issues. I always love coming in here because it doesn't matter if it's a small group or a large group. You are well prepared, and you are not going to make sure, you're going to make sure that I do not leave here empty-handed, and I appreciate that. But the idea is questions and answers, and I'm looking forward to that. But let me give you an update on 4 areas. One is the update on the Economic Recovery Act, healthcare reform, energy legislation, which / energy, climate change, and 8A contracting. First, let me start with the economic recovery. And I am very proud to say one thing. Even though the delegation split on this issue, which was the stimulus bill, I voted for the stimulus bill, and I'm very proud of that fact because it was an important bill to bring resources to this state and to the country at a time that this economy in January, February, if you looked at the economic conditions of this economy, any number you looked at, the economy was going one direction, down. So we had to do something to kind of jerk it out of the position it was in. And I look at what we have done and think about it. In those first 13 months before we passed that bill, 3.6 million people had lost their jobs. The job indicator will take a few months to catch up to what we're doing. Today it was announced 9.5% unemployment, highest level in over almost 3 decades. The economy had shrank almost 6.3% in the final 3 months of 2008, and the worst showing in a quarter of a century. So it was important from a variety of ways to stimulate the economy, get some resources in there. Through the state government, Alaska alone, through the state government resources, will receive over $900 million in recovery funds over the next 2 years. And we've already seen where that's having some impact. Along with that, the federal government direct expenditure into this economy, into Alaska's economy over the next 2 years, will be an additional $450 million. And just to give you a little flavor of what some of those expenditures are in and where they're going, for example, through Indian Health Services, there was only 2 new hospitals to be built in this country. One of them is going to be in Nome, Alaska with this stimulus money, $150 million. And it's going to start now. And there is clearly a long list. I'm just going to rattle through just a couple, give you a perspective. New airport in Kodiak. 100 projects in Alaska's military bases, over $55 million in direct payments in military bases. Along with that, over $55 million in direct payments to tribes for housing and energy improvements. In just the past week, $4.5 million for fish habitat restoration, $3.3 million from the Treasury Department's Native American Community Development Financial Institution Fund for 3 Alaska projects, $14 million for health clinics around the state, including Sitka, Yakutat, Wrangell, and Skagway, to say a few, plus millions more in airport funding and making sure they are in the shape they need to be in, as well as energy, conservation, and other areas that you'll see over time here. Again, the stimulus money, even though it passed in February, is now starting to flow into the economy. I think as summer finishes out, you'll see more of these dollars. Just the health clinic money alone, when you look at that list across the state, and you know it as well as anybody, clinics are an important part of the healthcare system. And if they're not properly funded or have the capital improvements they need to deliver the quality services, it will have a negative impact to the health of our state. So putting these dollars on the table will make a big difference in the long term, I believe. Along with that, we are dealing with healthcare reform. And let me start by saying, and I get this question all the time, or comment, I should say. It's not really a question when people come up to me on this issue. They usually have one of 2 things, and there's some commentary. Usually they say, don't vote for that healthcare reform, or vote for that healthcare reform bill. The problem is there's no real single bill. There's multiple bills right now. Healthcare reform will be a very complicated issue, with everyone in this country being touched at some point or another. So it's important that we make sure we do the health care reform properly. We've done a couple things already in a small way under any normal situation would be landmark. For example, we expanded and reauthorized the Children's Health Insurance Program for 5 more years. What does that mean for Alaska? Potentially up to 1,200 more young people covered by health care and millions across this country. That alone would be an enormous piece of legislation. But we didn't stop there. We've done another piece of legislation that for the first time, and again, this would never probably have passed in the past, and that is having FDA be able to regulate tobacco products. We think this is important for the health of this country and long-term health of all of us here in this state. Now, when you think about those two issues, again, if it was a normal course of business, we'd kind of close the book on health care and move on to something else. But the reality is we recognize in this country 46 million people do not have health care, including 115,000 Alaskans. 21,000 of them are children. And when you think about today, those that are covered by health care, it doesn't matter if it's government operated or insurance paid. About $1,000 of everybody's costs are currently paying for the uninsured. And what do I mean by that? If you're paying and you're insured and you're paying an insurance premium, $1,000 of that is paying for the uninsured. If you're in the system of government-run programs, more than likely you're paying for part of that uninsured. So we have to create a fairness to the system and make sure we balance it, that everyone pays their fair share, but also we make sure we have quality health care delivered to as many as possible. Healthcare spending in this country in the last, when you think of the economy itself, 18% of the economy is healthcare alone. And it's rising at more than 6% a year. This is an issue that if we don't deal with it soon, down the road it will be so enormous in how to cover this and how to deal with it, it's going to affect us all. And that is a very dangerous situation that we cannot afford. If we just slowed down the growth, just slowed it down by 1.5%, the growth of healthcare, it could create over 500,000 jobs and boost the economy and income of a family of 4 by over $2,600 a year by just slowing the cost down. And when you look at healthcare reform, you got to make sure there's a lot of issues. And just recently, we dealt with it around small business. I released a report along with several people who did some research on it, and we compared if we did no reform to doing some reform. By just doing some reform, over the next 10 years, the amount of money we can save to the small business community, and this is an astounding number when you hear it, is $800 billion over the next 10 years to small businesses, if we do some reform. And that is, again, a critical thing. When you think about small business, they're the biggest drivers of this national economy and our state economy. They are the critical piece that will turn this economy around, and the more we can do for small business will be important, because who are small business people? They're not just the retailers, they're fishermen, they're contractors, they're realtors, they're people who are 1-, 2-person operations, 3-person operations. It is critical that we make a difference and have an impact for them. Recently, I sent a letter to Senator Max Baucus, who's the chair of the Finance Committee, who's drafting the majority of the health care reform. And I made sure we laid out several things that we were interested in. I will now supplement that over the next week or so with some additional items that are going to be important for Alaska. But here's just a few, just so you know where kind of we laid out the rules. One was addressing our health care workforce shortage, strengthening Indian health services, and reducing health disparities. And I think the initiative that you're laying out tonight or today is an example of one of those disparities. And quality health care for our veterans, especially access to care, is critical. And as well as that, sustaining and increasing our investment to prevention and wellness. If we want to answer the question to healthcare today and into the future, it's about figuring out how we ensure that people have the tools to be able to deal with being better, live a healthier lifestyle, because if you can prevent the disease or the illness from happening, the costs will go down or stabilize, and obviously people will live longer, and that is a good thing. After this lunch, I'm going to the search program to visit with staff, and obviously they will probably give me a bigger packet than this. But I'm looking forward to that, because that is how I get information. As I said during the campaign, you don't just see me at election time, you see me during the process of the service, because it's important for me to get feedback from you so I understand where I need to be focused on and what things I need to be working on as a senator. Two other issues, and I see they're getting everything set up, so I don't want to, I'm nervous about the food being served here. This energy legislation. The Senate Energy Committee has finished their bill, which increases incentives for energy efficiency, boosts investment into our renewable energy economy. And as you look at the issue, even though some parts of the country have had moderate to lower prices in energy, we of course still experience high energy costs. As I landed today and I got in the car and we were driving to our first appointment, and they said the power is out. Now please do not say I did that. That power went out for some other reason. But it reminded me very quickly of what Juneau experienced when the power really went out in the wrong time of the year, and what you had to do and the costs that were associated with that. And so energy, climate change are going to be a pretty significant piece of legislation as we move forward. There's no question we need action on this bill. We know in the bill that's coming out of the Energy Committee, that has come out of the Energy Committee, we heard very aggressively during the campaign how important it was to ensure that hydro is part of the equation when it comes to renewable energy. I want to say that Senator Murkowski and I, Senator Murkowski sat on the ranking as a ranking member, put in there an amendment which we were working with her on to make sure was in there, and that was to ensure that this is part of the equation. So it's in the current bill. We want to do a little more tweaking to it, but as I told people, we're halfway home, and that's a good thing for Southeast. So we can use it as we know we can use it here in Southeast, protecting the habitat, but providing energy for Southeast. That is the future of energy in this community. So we're excited that it's in the bill at this point. We'll continue to work forward to make sure some other pieces that create some financing mechanisms and solve the problem long term here. The last thing I want to mention is 8A, and this is one that has caused a lot of stir, as we all know, within the Alaska Native community, and that's the 8A contracting. And the issue that Senator McCaskill from Missouri is working on, and she will have a hearing coming up on July 16th. She's put out requests to about 20 Alaska Native corporations and asked for information, and she has received all that, which I appreciate all the folks that have done that work. We have asked both myself and Senator Murkowski not only to give an opening commentary at the committee hearing, but to be at the dais. And why is that important? Because if we're sitting up there with her, with Senator McCaskill, we get to ask questions. We get to participate. And we have just gotten word that it looks like we're going to be there together at the committee with the Alaska Native corporations. So we're going to be at the dais to ask those questions, but to be there in support of the great progress that 8A corporations have done, not only for our state, but for the people of Alaska, the Alaska Native community, and the work they've done around this globe in the business ventures they have done. But we have to be very real about it. As I've said to many of the leaders, there are going to be some great challenges we're going to have here. But I believe the record is very strong in what we've done. We have our own issues that we need to deal with the 8A corporations, but generally, I think we have a great case to lay out there of the value and what they have done in bringing economic viability to parts of Alaska that have not seen it in decades. So there are great opportunities for us to see this move forward. I know when I met with the Corps of Engineers, they bragged about the value of 8A corporations and what they've been able to do, because if you ever deal with a Corps project, it's seasonal. You got to be at a certain time, certain place. You cannot delay the work because of the weather and conditions that they may be working in. They have called upon 8As many times and have had great success, not only in the cost of the project, but in the completion and the value of the project. So I think we have a great case. We're going to have a little tug-of-war. There's no question about it. But I believe we can make a great case in why 8A corporations are valuable. And both Senator Murkowski will be working on your behalf, but on Alaska's behalf, to ensure that this moves forward in the right direction. Let me finish and just say two other things, just to kind of a notification, and that is, as you probably saw a couple days ago, there was an announcement by the Obama administration that there will be 5 secretaries coming to Alaska: Secretary of Interior, Education, Housing, Energy, and Agriculture, as part of their Rural America tour. And for us to have 5 secretaries coming within the first year of an administration, I think is a huge value for us. Now, saying that, I always joke about this when I'm back in Washington, D.C., and that is they say rural America, and I always like to say, well, rural America is one definition. What I like to describe is extreme rural America. And then I usually kind of lay it out of what it means when you come to Alaska, and not only to Southeast, but to every part of Alaska, and what that means in the conditions that we have to work in. But at the end of the day, I think we have some great things to show off here. And I think as Alaskans, we'll do a great job in showing them off and how we can see the national government looking at Alaska in a different perspective. So it's an exciting time. There are a lot of issues facing us in Washington, D.C. The list will grow, no question about it. The issues we're dealing with today, energy, health care, climate change, issues around appropriations, as well as these other issues I just laid out to you. There are many great things that I think we can do for Alaska back in Washington, D.C. And I will close on this note. It is always a pleasure, I have to tell you this, to come back home. As I tell people in Washington, D.C., I work in Washington, D.C., but I live in Alaska. This is my home. This is where I come back to get rejuvenated, to get ideas, to get packets, and always get good food. And the other, I said I was going to stop here.